Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our biweekly integration sync. Today, we're going to be talking about integrations with Subspace testnet, with Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem, where we're at with all that, and where we're going in the future. Serge, if you'd like to start off by just giving us an update on how things are going with the new parachains.
Yeah, so as you all may know, there was a second cohort of parachains going live on this weekend on Polkadot, specifically Centrifuge, Affinity, Hydra Interlay, and Composable. And right after they were live, I created archives on our DigitalOcean environment dedicated to archives. And we also have added them on Relayer backend, and I think Leo already added them on the UI. So yeah, they're like visible on our Relayer, and you can check the progress.
Okay, cool. Pretty straightforward. Any questions on that from anybody? Okay. All right. Anything else you want to cover, Serge, aside from feeds validation?
There were some updates in Relayer, but they are related to feed validation. So I will tell you more later.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, so we don't have Leo here, but you're saying the front end has been updated to reflect all these as well.
Yeah, there was a PR. I didn't check it live, but I approved PR.
Okay, so it's just waiting to be merged and deployed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, in that case, Skylar, we'll turn it over to you to run through the board and talk about the wider progress on the integration side.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Serge said, we added a few more parachains to the Relayer these past couple of weeks. Affinity, Composable, Centrifuge, Hydra DX, and Interlay. So that is the main progress with the Polkadot parachains. Those are from the second combination, the second wave of Polkadot parachains. We are still waiting on Sora main Gata to be onboarded for Kusama. And then also, since last week, we found out who Parachain X was. There was this mysterious parachain that won a slot without announcing it. Turned out to be Moon River. And the same thing happened with Kilt. Kilt also won a second parachain. So they both now own 2 parachain slots. So the plan is to switch over from their original parachain lease onto this one. So it's to be seen whether that will affect our history or their history, and then our Relayer. I doubt they're going to wipe the chain, so like start back from zero. So I don't know exactly how that'll affect the Relayer, but they're on here on the parachain board. If there's no changes, then we can just delete them. Otherwise, we have their slots up here for the parachains. Other than that, I just added Nodal. They were in the last cohort as well. So need to contact them, and then they can be onboarded. Otherwise, that's all the updates.
So when they get a different slot, does that mean that they have a new para ID? That their para blocks are going to show differently? Okay, yeah. So that probably will require some sort of a patch or something on our side so that that renders correctly as one continuous feed. You're muted, Nazar, or we can't hear you, Nazar. He's been having audio issues with his new computer.
Should be able to hear me now.
Yeah,
we should probably wait first to see why they have the second parachain slot, what they exactly want to do with it, and then decide. But if it's changes, like we probably need to archive it again under different per ID.
I'm pretty sure they're just extending their lease out. It's just not on the same slot. I don't believe they're planning to run two different parachains at the same time.
Yeah,
Did you know
said
they
they're
only get
planning
it
to
for like
switch
a
over.
year?
Mhm.
Yeah, and so they're basically reserving the next year, but it's just not on the same slot ID. So there's going to have to be like a migration of some sort to a different slot.
That's a strange approach, though.
That's Polkadot.
Mhm.
That's how it works.
Yeah, I think it's a business approach. They just want to. I mean, it's a lot cheaper too. They're able to self-fund these slots. They don't even have to go out and get a crowd loan. I think there's more behind it, but I think the main reason was to be able to extend the lease for a cheaper price.
How would that work right now, Serge? Like conceptually, the way that we have the feed set up, is there a way that we could change the pointer for the para ID within the feed?
No, I think we should add another like item to the config, like a new chain, and yeah, we would just keep adding blocks like from the new chain. I think if we maybe we can merge them, but I have to think about it a little bit. But the easy approach would be like just to treat it as a new chain.
Okay. Skylar, what's the? Or sorry, were you going to say something, Beth?
No, I was just thinking, like, I wonder how they're gonna maintain the entire history so far when they move to the new parachain, because they would have to do some kind of migration or start fresh. That would just defeats the entire purpose of a chain, right? So
Here comes Subspace to the rescue. Skylar, what's the time frame? When is this transition expected to occur? Like when does it currently send?
That's a great question. I don't know. That's something I was planning on getting more details on when I contact them. I'm not sure exactly. I just know
We should
that they
just be able to
recently
look at
won the parachain.
the like parachains dot whatever that website is, parachains.org or parachains.info. I think it actually tells you exactly when their slots start and end. But if you can do some research
when
on
the
that,
slots start, yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
if you can do some research on that and figure out when that transition will occur, when the next one is, so that we can make sure that we've got our, we've got that built into our timeline and our roadmap to account for that, because we don't need to, jump through our ass right now to fix it if it's not going to be a problem for like 4 or 5 months.
Sure. Okay. Are you interested in when they'll make the transition from their old parachain to the new parachain, or when their lease slot ends?
I believe they're the same. Well, I mean,
Okay.
the current lease, when the
Mhm.
first lease ends and the new lease starts, that is when they should be making the transition, but they'll still have
Mhm.
like another year after that, or however long it is.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah. I'll get more details on that.
Okay, great. In the meantime, Serge, if you can think a little bit more about how you'd like to handle that and create an issue as well, just to figure out an architecture for this.
Sure.
Thanks, Ed. Great.
Okay, cool. There's some good reasons for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else, Skylar?
Nope, that's all on the engineering side.
All right. Okay, anything else on the parachains? No? Okay. Serge, if you'd like to give us a kind of a quick update on where you're at with feeds validation, and then maybe you could just kind of walk us through the code as it exists right now, just kind of from first principles of like what it's doing and where it's at.
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen. Oh, I need to reconnect. Sorry.
Okay, so they plan to do something that is called swap, and basically jump from one slot to another at some point. but that is like, apparently it's not a super well defined procedure right now, but it is something that is coming. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure someone has more details within the team, but I saw that article. They were just talking about the function for it, so we'll see.
And theirs was like November, October when they got their first slot.
That was Polkadot. This is Moon River. So this is Kusama from like summer or something.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, they're one
June,
of the
July.
first.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. So in that case, we've got about 3 or 4 months if they had a 1-year lease. Okay, if you can just confirm those dates for us, Skylar, and make sure we have those on the calendar.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, it looks like they end the first one on May 13th. So April, May, 2 more months. That would be the logical time to switch over.
Okay, so it looks like it's coming up pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me try one more time. Okay. So should we start with pilot feeds first or relayer first? Maybe
I guess relayer would be this, or whatever you think is best.
Okay, let me try with pilot feeds first. So we have, yeah, this is my branch. Okay. So we have a Subspace node, and we have a bunch of palettes. The main palette for this like flow is palette feeds, where we submit. We have calls to put data objects and to particular feeds. That's why it's called palette feeds. So before you put objects, you create a feed, and when you create, currently in this branch, I implemented that when we create a feed, yeah, I'm just hiding like extra crates I had to add for bridge to work.
You can click with Alt or Option. It should collapse all the files, and you can just expand the ones you need.
Click what? Sorry.
Click on arrow with Option. It will
Arrow.
expand or collapse everything. Oh, the arrow on the left. Just click with Option on it. Yep.
Oh wow. Okay, so it feeds. Yeah, this is it. So this is the palette, and yeah, we have the struct block, struct finality proof. I will jump into details later. So we have a storage for where is it? Where is it? Here. Yeah, we have objects which we submit into the palette feeds, and in this case we submit blocks of the other chains, Kusama or Polkadot, and their parachains, and every block has every block is submitted as an object, which is a vector of bytes, and every object has metadata. In this case, we also like receive it as vector of bytes, but on the client, on the JavaScript in Relayer or other like JavaScript application, it's a JSON with different information like block number, block hash, and other stuff. but here we just save it, and we don't actually care about the contents. And we also save totals, total size per feed, like the number of bytes, megabytes for a particular feed, like for example for a Polkadot chain, and the count of objects, in this case count of blocks that are already submitted to the pilot feeds. So yeah, we have a storage, like a hash map for metadata, for totals, and yeah, we have a current feed ID. So every time we create a feed, this value is incremented. So, and yeah, this is like the basic stuff. And we have like a, as I mentioned, a function, a call to create feed. And I have added a bunch of stuff here to initialize bridge. And we have a function to put data. Yeah, so we need to specify feed ID, object. In this case, it's block metadata. And I have also added a proof for relay chain blocks, so they can be verified using this bridge palette. So this is like a brief overview. And regarding validation specifically, what I have added so far is this bridge initialization, currently only for Kusama. These are the initial authorities for Kusama. And here we initialize bridge. We call this pilot bridge grandpa initialize method. And this part works. And when we submit, so by default, we initialize bridge from Genesis, but we can specify any block in theory. However, currently I face the problem that if we start from Genesis, as I mentioned, we submit finality proofs for relay chain blocks, for Kusama in this case. So the problem is, if we process blocks from Genesis, I cannot fetch proofs for blocks before 6 million something, before block number 6 million something. And I reached out to Parity regarding this. So initial response was that there was some issue with Kusama, and they had to make a hard fork of to fix it. And after hard fork, it should work fine, but it doesn't work fine for me. I don't know, maybe there was some confusion. I asked for clarifications because the block, when the hard fork happened, they mentioned was 1,400,000 something. And I tried blocks after to fetch finality proofs for blocks after that number, and it just returns error before this 6 million something block. So yeah, I'm waiting for clarifications, but the actual process works. We just get the error related to weights because, as I mentioned, we initialize bridge with Kusama initial authorities, but when we fetch finality proof for a block, let's say like some recent block, we cannot verify it because in this pilot we have initial authorities, but they already changed many times, right? Because we missed those consensus logs and we couldn't update the authorities in our pilot bridge pilot bridge grandpa. So that's why we get this error that the weight is below threshold. Yeah, this is the current challenge. And do you have any questions on this?
Yeah, how would we go about getting those consensus logs and updating these authorities as they change?
So it is handled by Pilot Bridge Grandpa. We just need to give it the headers. But because we cannot fetch finality proofs for those early headers, early blocks, we cannot submit headers. Because first this Pilot, it checks, it verifies the block. And then if it is a valid block, then we update headers within the Pilot. It updates the storage. So first
What
we
is
need to
the Oracle?
figure. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So first we need to clarify why this RPC doesn't work for all blocks, for early blocks.
Okay, that was going to be my question. You said there's an RPC. Like, what's the Oracle to get these consensus logs? Are we reading them from the object that we're putting into the feed, or do we have to have some other external feed to get the, or I mean, not technically a feed, but some data source, some Oracle to get these consensus and new authorities?
So consensus logs are part of the header, but we need to fetch finality proofs, and there is an RPC endpoint for that.
But then how are those treated, I guess? Is that like an Oracle, like a trusted Oracle that brings in those finality proofs, or how are they handled as like an extrinsic into the chain?
It's not part of the chain as far as I understand.
Oh, so it's not verified in the runtime?
It should be part of the RPC.
It's a part of the consensus. It's in the
Yeah.
client.
You should have all the signatures of the authorities of the current epoch. And if I remember correctly, if the authority is going to change in the next era, that change will also be part of this block. And the Grandpa Bridge ideally detects that from those data that we get in along with the signatures.
So it's
Right,
not,
but finality is not part of the block. So there is authority set, which is in the block, but finality proofs they're like, finality happens later at some point. It's not like strictly defined. So block is already like sealed, signed, and in the storage by that point. It doesn't change.
I guess my deeper question is the finality proof at some point, not with the block, but from our point of view of the feed, there needs to be like a runtime. I mean, like in Ethereum, this would be like a smart contract, right? That there's like a light client smart contract that's validating consensus of some other chain. So it has to somehow exist in the state transition logic of the blockchain itself for it to really be a trustless bridge. Versus being like something that we just say, oh, the client handled it and like the runtime doesn't care about it. So I guess that's where I'm confused right now. But you guys are saying the runtime doesn't.
Will check it, but it is not checked on like Kusama runtime.
Okay.
So for
if
Kusama
our,
runtime, it's external. For us, it's internal because we receive the whole thing.
okay, so we get so yeah, if we have a check in our runtime to validate this finality proof, then that means we need like an extrinsic to send that finality proof into the runtime, right?
That's part of the code already.
Where is that coming from?
So finality
Who's sending that
proofs,
extrinsic?
finality proof is fetched on the relayer. So we submit the block with metadata and finality proof. And on the Pilot feeds, we decode it and submit to the Pilot Bridge Grandpa.
Okay, so it's part of the feed, of the put now, basically. It's an optional argument into the put.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But there's nothing to prevent us from just writing data that doesn't validate to the blockchain. So it's like yeah. Okay, I'm just trying to understand. Okay, so in that case, there's like when you're in the feed, is there some sort of a flag or something in the feed status that you can know, like what is the last confirmed block or the last valid block versus what is the last proposed or submitted block?
No, we only keep track of the object count. So if we start from Genesis, then we know like how many objects we have, and this is the block height.
I think the answer is it is stored in the palette grandpa, bridge grandpa, whatever.
Oh, it only stores finalized header.
Right.
Okay, I guess what I'm getting at is like, for this to be useful, like, I mean, right now we're saying like, just externally, like, hey, we're validating this logic, but like for it to be actually like specifically useful for like a smart contract developer or like somebody who's like building an application on top of Subspace that's depending on this data to be correct and not just like trusting us that it's correct, they would need some way to know, like for a specific object in the storage or for a specific height of a feed, that this feed is valid according to some logic, in this case, grandpa validation. So we just need to figure out some way to expose that or make that readable to a developer from the RPC or I don't know exactly what, but does that make sense?
Like a customer RPC method. So whoever wants to query Subspace node, they can get this information.
Well, I think it should just be part of the state for the feed, right? Like whenever I query a feed and I get its height, I should be able to just know, like contract state in Ethereum, like what is the last finalized block or the height of the last finalized block or the last item, I guess, in the feed, just more generically.
A quick question from you: did we always assume that the feed data that is coming in is some kind of a block on a chain, or could we assume that it's much more generic data object that's coming in?
It's more generic, and it was only generic before. This is only now we are adding validation as an optional feature.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, you want to keep going, Serge?
Yeah. So yeah, this is the pilot feeds, and I can also show you Relayer. I have a branch where I currently work in connection to these pilot feeds validation task, and yeah, so Relayer is a Node.js application which is kind of like a client. It fetches blocks using RPC endpoints from all those chains we have in the config file, like two relay chains, Polkadot, Kusama, and their parachains, and it submits them, all those blocks with metadata and proofs, if necessary, to pilot feeds. And few updates I did were, first of all, there was an issue with converting blocks with justifications to the binary format, because we submit blocks as a binary. And yeah, there was a problem converting blocks with justifications only. And because we never saw any blocks with justifications before, that was not an issue. But since now we know specific blocks that have justifications, we had this issue, and I fixed that. Yeah, so here you can see that we fetch those finality proofs for relay chain blocks, and we add them to the array of objects to submit. And yeah, we add it as a proof, as an argument, as an optional argument for put call. And Yeah, so we had this script to create feed. Before we start relayer, as I mentioned, we have to create fund accounts, and then we create feed for a specific chain or all the chains in the configuration. And now, when we create a feed, we also provide a header for relay chain blocks, so we know when to initialize bridge, from which header we initialize bridge. So this is the update related to this. And yeah, this is the actual change for conversion to binary. So we have this function block to binary, and previously we assumed that justifications is an array of hex, but eventually they're array of bytes. So we treat them as array of bytes and submit them as bytes. Yeah, this is the current state for relayer, and this is a draft PR, because if we merge it now, it will break relayer in production. So after we add changes on the backend, on the node side, we can merge this one. Any questions on relayer?
Hey, Serge, I had a question about going to the consensus log item, how we update the authorities. So I understand that the finality proofs are optional arguments that get included with the object if they're needed. But if we have a change to the authority set, is that also included in the consensus log? Or is that consensus log also included in the put object? Or is that something separate? Is there another way to update those authorities?
You mean finality proofs? Because they are not consensus logs.
Consensus log is part of the header.
Right. And finality proofs is not. So we fetch it separately.
Okay. So we're putting both the finality proofs and the updates to the authority set in the object, basically everything we need.
Consensus logs, yes, as Nazar said, it's part of the header, and header is part of the block. So we submit it by default.
Right. But the finality proofs you're fetching externally, but just including them as part of the put call if they're needed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I understand that. Okay, cool. I'm just thinking here. I mean, I think that there's a very fair shortcut that we can take with any bridging design. That if our bridges don't necessarily have to be backwards compatible from Genesis, as long as everybody agrees on like some checkpoint of what the chain is. I think this is a very fair, like pragmatic optimization to make. So like, for example, if there was a hard fork and all these changes to pallet grandpa bridges, we can just say, well, we're not going to start actually doing feeds validation until like the block when we deploy this validator on a relay or in our chain, so that we're only really going from there. And with sort of social consensus that everybody agrees that at this point, this was the current, you know, the tip of Kusama or Polkadot. And then from there on, I mean, it's like with a lot of clients, like they have these like checkpoints built into them as well. And from there on, then we can say, okay, well, now we're validating in real time, but then we don't have to handle all this like technical debt and all these issues that we're having. And I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think they were even having Aura instead of Babe initially. So it's like a completely different consensus at the very beginning of Kusama. And we can do this with checkpoint, but then we need to add support for submitting objects in backwards direction. So have a checkpoint, we can see what was the parent, and then we can put the parent, and then we can put more blocks towards the genesis. So every block from the checkpoint towards the genesis will be also kind of implicitly verified by the block hash. Otherwise, if you go in from genesis forward, We don't really know if the change we are submitting is correct until we get to the checkpoint, which is much later.
I think we do, because we can just look at the state in the, of the feed to see if it's still part of that longest chain. I think that can just be implicit.
Oh,
Well, if some block is part of the, I mean, it's basically, they're not validating, so they're not validating objects as they come in. They're saying, well, this implementation, like the implementation of our feed basically is correct now. So implicitly everything before it is correct. And if there was some audit of Subspace, then we trust that they did that
right,
correctly. I guess
but then how do we insert blocks which are before the checkpoint? We also want to have them in the history.
There's no validation at that point. It's just like it is now.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, how do we verify that the blocks that we are inserting before the checkpoint are actually part of that checkpoint? Like older history of the checkpoint.
We don't.
Right, but if we are adding them in backwards direction, we can actually verify that. Because the checkpoint block will have its parent as part of the header, the parent header hash. And then the previous one will also have it. So we can like link them back towards Genesis.
Okay,
we can verify all of the history before that.
Okay, let's take this discussion offline, Nizar. I see your point. I think we need to have a deeper discussion on it. Okay, so I think we agree in principle that it's fair. It's just an implementation challenge here. Okay, and I think this goes as well with Ethereum, since Ethereum is close to a proof of stake consensus mechanism. Ethereum 1.0, that would actually be far easier to validate than whatever it's called, their memhash proof, or geez, I forget the name of it. Whatever their really complicated memory hard proof of work algorithm is, which is non-trivial to validate in the runtime. Possible for sure, but non-trivial. Okay.
I think here we can use a Snowbridge one. They're already doing most of the Ethereum verification through their palettes on runtime. I think we can just use that, I guess, underneath as a transparent layer on top of feeds or in lieu with feeds.
Right. Yeah, we don't need to reinvent the wheel for sure, but we might not even need to, like, if we can checkpoint Ethereum after they do the migration from proof of work to proof of stake, we might not even have to worry about validating proof of work at all. But I'm sure that the Snowbridge guys are already thinking about this too, so maybe that will just get inherited by default. Okay. Okay, that's it. Just wanted to comment on that, Serge. If you got anything else you want to cover?
No, that's all on my side.
Okay, any other questions for Serge? Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Ethereum integration. So that's one of the next things we're going to want you to look at and focus on, Serge. Basically archiving the full blocks of Ethereum from Genesis. So there's really kind of three, like, if we want to think about this like a big picture, like a long-term vision, there's like three parts to this. There's Ethereum 1.0, there's Ethereum 2.0, and then there's all the L2s. Okay, so that's massive. That's a massive project, right? Especially given that Ethereum 2 and the L2s are like still, like, what are they? I don't know, kind of changes day to day. So let's really just focus on like Ethereum 1.0 with the current Ethereum blockchain. And I think there's actually a lot of open questions here about like, well, which implementation do we actually want to run a client of, and how much data is it actually, how this will be different from Polkadot and Substrate, like which service we want to use as like an RPC endpoint. Are we going to use like Infura, or can we just connect directly into the network? Like which client library are we going to use? There's actually like a lot of design questions here. So I'd like you to do some research and kind of explore that and think about what you think might be the best way to do this. do some homework. And then we can think about actually implementing some of this stuff. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then of course, that's just the data input side. Then there's also going to be the validation side, like Ben was talking about, where we're going to need to do some feeds validation on this as well. And there's already a lot of work that's been done on validating Ethereum within Substrate. So hopefully we'll be able to reuse all of that. But I don't believe that those are actually bringing over the full blocks. I think those are just bringing over the block headers and like the state roots. So unfortunately, we probably won't be able to reuse that for the feed itself. But there might be some like patterns that we can adapt from them as well. Like they do have like some notion of a relayer, right? At least it's getting block headers. So maybe we can it probably would be worth looking into those implementations just to see if there's something about the architecture there that we can reuse versus having to like roll our own from scratch. Because it's probably just a question of like, are we getting a block header or a full block from an RPC endpoint? Okay. Whenever you feel like you've got an idea of what you'd like to do, or you've kind of mapped out the problem space, why don't you reach out to Nazar and I, and we can have a discussion on that. We don't need to wait 2 weeks. So just whenever you're ready, just reach out to us or on Discord, and we can talk about that some more.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, I have an update regarding the Moon River second parachain. Now's a good time. I was talking with their head of ambassadors. It sounds like they will be able to retain the chain ID from the last parachain. I'm not sure if that's the answer we're looking for. The lease period starts a month before their old one ends. So there's going to be like a month of overlap. And they're still looking for guidance from Parity on the swap function, since they're the first parachain to do that. So that's the update. Do you guys have any other questions that you want me to find out from them about that?
Chain ID or para ID?
I asked Para
those
ID.
are different things.
I asked Para ID, and he said, "Do you mean chain ID?" I don't know if those are. I thought it sounds like they're different.
Okay.
I can ask for more
Probably
clarification
same.
on that. Yeah.
Who are you talking to over there?
Turrets, head of ambassador. I can escalate it. I'm sure if there's. He
Okay,
said
I think I was thinking about protocol ID, which is like used in networking and stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
I asked if there'd be any trouble making transitions for anyone who's trying to sync the history of the chain. He said there shouldn't be any problems. Should be a smooth transition. It's just they have to submit a request for the swap. Both parachains do, and then Parity has to approve it. It sounds like. Otherwise, it should be smooth. So.
Okay.
So yeah, I can give an update on that 2 weeks from now, March 31st. That'll be 3 days or 4 days before that slot starts. So we should have some more info by then.
Yeah, while you dropped off to reconnect, Serge, we realized that actually it's going to be happening in about 6 weeks is when the switch will be happening. So it is coming up pretty fast. So if you could, like we said, do a little bit of architectural research on and follow up with Skylar offline to make sure that we're ahead of the game on this as well, to make sure that we can support this transition.
Oh, if they keep saying para ID, then it shouldn't be a problem. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. I'll message you about that, Serge.
Awesome. Okay, Leo, we covered your part already, actually, before you got on. So I don't think there's any updates unless there's something significant you wanted to let us know, or you had any blockers or questions on the front end side.
No, not for now. I have been working more in the desktop application, so not many updates from there.
Yeah, and we need to jump over to that call right now anyways.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, any last call for questions or comments from the group? No? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for watching. We will see you guys again in a couple weeks with some more exciting updates.